Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ashir Sayed, the Public Relations Director for the Mahdi Youth Society and your host for today evening. Today we are gathered in a virtual setting to offer our community some guidance when it comes to choosing educational pathways and career choices. This program is called the University Seminar. We're honored to have a number of professionals from our community who have taken a number of different pathways who will be sharing their experiences and offering some tips which we could all take advantage of. The format of this event will start with introductions from these professionals, followed by interactive presentations from these speakers, where I will be asking questions to these guests on behalf of you. If you have any questions, feel free to message them. Feel free to send them to our social media pages, ahead of time, because we will not be taking any live questions. We will be having 3 nights of discussions, with today focusing on computer science and business. Tomorrow, November 22nd at 5 p.m., we will be having a seminar about law and engineering. And next Saturday, November 28th, at the same time, 5 p.m., we'll be having a seminar focused around life, health science, and medicine. So tonight we are presented with 2 esteemed guests. I'd like to introduce the first one, Brother Kazim Naqvi. He is a computer science student at the University of Toronto, the Scarborough campus. He is specializing in computer science in the software engineering stream. He is a 4th-year student, and he has recently completed his co-op as a front-end software engineer at HubSpot. So, Brother Kazim Naqvi, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for taking out your time. Next, we have Brother Murtaza Sayed, a business specialist, a graduate from UFT Rotman Commerce as his undergrad, focusing on finance and economics. For his master's, he is currently at McMaster University at their DeGroote Business School. He is focusing on finance and valuations. He has recently completed his co-op as a finance analyst at Forrester's Financials. His future career goals include interest in credit with capital markets, consulting, and entrepreneurship. So, Brother Murtaza Sayed, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for taking out your time and being here with us tonight.
Alaikum salam, and thank you so much for the introduction, Ashir.
No problem. Anyway, so that's enough of me talking. I'm sure you're all here for much better presentations by these professionals here. So we're going to start off with Brother Kazim Naqvi just giving a presentation about himself, as well as providing some tips that he has learned through his undergrad and co-op journey. So Brother Kazim Naqvi, the stage is yours.
Awesome. So we can go ahead and get started. You can get the PowerPoint up.
Yeah, sure. 1 second.
Awesome. Okay, so Usher has already introduced me, so we can jump right ahead to the agenda. Awesome. So today I want to talk about a few different things. I want to start off by explaining what computer science is. I think this is the most important part of what I want to talk about today. And then after, the usual different programs, costs, co-op, university rankings, and then finish off with some tips and tricks. Next slide. Awesome. So sometimes in high school, a lot of us don't really know what computer science is. We sort of have this understanding that we're going to university so we can learn different programming languages, or we can learn how to program. Programming is just one of the tool sets you use as a computer scientist. So I want to break down what computer science actually is so you have a better understanding of what you might be getting yourself into. So I pulled this definition off Wikipedia. Computer science is the study of algorithmic processes and computational machines. An algorithm is a series of steps. So we're writing lots of algorithms, and at the heart of computer science, that's really what it is, algorithms. So I put down an example there. How can you properly and optimally multiply 2 numbers? We all know how to multiply 2 numbers, and we can probably write down a series of steps for it. But there's a few things you consider as a computer scientist when you solve problems. Can we do this properly? Is it feasible? For example, when we multiply the 2 numbers, is our algorithm always giving us the right answer? And is it an optimal solution? In our case, we only have one optimal solution because when you multiply 2 real numbers, you only have one possible answer. In a case where you can have multiple different answers is, for example, you want a route from your house to council. You can have many different optimal solutions there, and not all of them are feasible. And there's multiple feasible solutions, but not as many optimal solutions. And you also look at how you can do this in a way that's fast enough for your given requirements. So these are a bunch of different things here. Sometimes when you're studying computer science, In some courses, you look at all of them, you look at a few of them, or you can even look at the prerequisites you need to actually approach a problem like this. So I just want to emphasize again, it's not just programming. There's a lot of math, and not just computational math, a lot of pure math, a lot of proofs involved as well. So hopefully you know what you're getting yourself into if you do pursue computer science. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so I've broken down a few different programs here. So we have theory of computation. In my opinion, this can be a fairly dry field, but it is very abstract and very complex, and you will appreciate the times where you do find solutions to the problems you work at. I don't want to get too much into the details of what it is, but you can search this up online and look at certain courses and what they offer. So you have data science, there's a lot of stats, math over there, artificial intelligence, again, a lot of stats and math. People sometimes don't realize that there is a lot of math and statistics that go behind these things. Computational linguistics, if you do study this field, you'll probably want to study a linguistics major as well. And again, there's a lot of math in there as well. Game design, again, linear algebra, lots of math. Software engineering, over here, you'll probably be programming a bit more. And this tends to be the more popular stream which people tend to choose. Human-computer interaction, that sort of leads you into UX, UI, stuff like that. A fairly complex field, but less programming there. And some universities split these up into different programs. Some of them have different streams. So the University of Toronto just has the computer science program, and then you can focus on different streams as a specialist in computer science. You can check out what different universities do on their websites for this. Next slide. All right. Costs per semester. So I think that should say per year. That's a typo. So at U of T, first year, their website indicates that you're paying $6,100, and after that, you're going to be paying about $11,000. I pay more than this at U of T, so it looks like the website is outdated. So I guess that's something to keep in mind. I pay north of $13,000 per year after first year. And then I put in different universities below at random. You have Carleton, which says 10,000, UIT 8,000. So fees do vary quite a bit from university to university. And again, you can look at different university websites, and something to keep in mind, fees usually always go up year to year. Next slide. Co-op, right? So maybe I can give a quick background of what my experience has been with co-op. So I'm in the co-op program at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. I've done 3 co-ops previously. My first co-op, I worked as a business intelligence developer at Ontario Shore Centre for Mental Health Sciences in Whitby, Ontario. My second co-op, I worked as a full stack developer working in web dev at the University of Toronto. And my third co-op, most recently, I did HubSpot as a front-end software engineer at HubSpot in Boston, Massachusetts. Something I want to point out is if you don't get into a co-op program, or if you don't end up going to a university which has a co-op program, you do not need to be in a co-op program to do internships. The onus is sort of on you to find internships, and a lot of companies have these roles open on their website. So even, for example, as a student who's in the co-op program, I'm actually applying to these co-op positions outside of my university job portal. So there isn't always value in being in the co-op program. There is some value where you do have a few positions which are exclusive to your university, but I guess you can weigh out the cost and see if it's worth it for you, or if you can see if the mentorship and guidance you get on applying for jobs is worth it. So University of Waterloo, say at the end of your program, you'll have paid about $6,000. The University of Toronto Scarborough says $4,800. Again, the University of Toronto Scarborough hasn't updated their website. You'll be paying more than this, closer to what the University of Waterloo indicates. And then Ryerson says $3,500. And again, these prices go up per semester. So if you were to split it per semester, you'd be paying a bit more each time. And then I have written down here. In Canada, all co-op positions must be paid. Please don't do any internships for free. You should be getting paid for your work. And then just some types of role. You don't always have to go into a software developer role. It tends to be the most popular choice, but there's data science. There's a lot of data science jobs out there. There's UX UI design. Again, a lot of jobs for that as well. And then there's quality assurance, which is manual testing, if you're into that. And then you can also go into being a business analyst, technical analyst, IT help desk. And yeah, so there's a variety of different things you can actually do with your degree as a computer scientist. Next slide. So I put down the averages on how much students tend to make for their first, second, and third internship. I just want to clarify these are averages. This isn't what you're expected to be paid. You could be getting paid as little as minimum wage, or you could be getting paid more than these averages. It really depends on what industry you work in and what type of role you're doing. But again, I guess that's more of something you'd want to consider once you're actually in university and applying for co-op roles. But something to keep in mind, these are averages. Generally, students tend to make around here if they're working in Canada. And I'll leave it there for now. Next slide. So I've put down the university rankings here. I wouldn't pay too much attention to these, especially if you're planning to stay in Canada. I mean, you'll be learning computer science regardless of where you go. If you do plan on working outside or leaving Canada, sometimes it can help to go to a higher ranked university just because there's more exposure to that university. Not to say that you can't do the same while going to a lower ranked university, but if you're interested, these are the top ranked universities by computer science here. And I pulled this off of topuniversities.com. And next slide. Right, so I want to end off by really emphasizing that if you want to go into computer science, you need to have a really good relationship with math. Computational math as well, but also pure math. So you're doing proofs in almost every single subject that you're taking in computer science. You don't really cover proofs in high school. So the closest thing I can tell you is when you're solving your trigonometric inequalities in grade 11 and 12, that's a form of a direct proof where you assume your left-hand side, for example, and you show that it's the same as your right-hand side. There's different ways to do proofs. You'll learn the prerequisites. So if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, that's completely okay. You'll learn predicate logic. You'll learn how to approach these problems, but there is a lot of math, and the math is going to seep into your programming courses. So even when you're taking computer graphics, for example, you're using linear algebra. If you're studying a machine learning course, you're using a lot of stats there. So if you aren't the best with math, you might want to start putting a bigger focus on that if you want to go into computer science. And then lastly, I have this here as what is POST as a disclaimer. So POST stands for Program of Study. And in my opinion, the University of Toronto does not do a very good job at articulating to high school students what this is. So if you are applying to computer science, or really most programs at the University of Toronto, you're not admitted directly into the program. You're in the department. So what that means is, depending on the demand of the program, you're going to complete a certain amount of computer science and math courses, and they're going to take your average from that course, and they're going to select the top few students to be entered into that program. So you're not guaranteed to be in computer science right after high school. So computer science is a very competitive program, and that's something to keep in mind. I know at the University of Toronto, Scarborough this year, they're going to admit about 200 students into the computer science specialist and major. And there's significantly more than 200 students who are currently trying to apply for that placement. Not to say that you have very low chances of getting in, but just to emphasize, you are going to have to work very hard if you do pursue this at the University of Toronto. What people do if they don't get in, which can happen, you can apply to a different program. Sometimes people will apply to stats or math. Not to say that those are easier. In fact, they might actually be harder depending on if the reason why you didn't get into computer science was because you weren't good at math. But they have less demand right now, so there's less students applying compared to computer science. Or you can switch universities. A lot of students oftentimes, they still want to study computer science, so they'll end up transferring to a different university. But that is a process that you should consider before applying or accepting an offer to the University of Toronto. And that's all I've got for you guys. And I guess best of luck to all of you applying, and I hope if you do choose computer science as your major, you enjoy it.
All right, thank you so much, Brother Kazim. I'm just gonna hit you with some questions now. I think this is a very general question that I'm sure you've gotten before, but I feel like it'd be very nice if we could clarify this. What's the difference between a CS student and a software engineer student?
Yeah, so as a computer science student, you're working with a lot more theoretical concepts. So that question is sort of like posed at the beginning, how do you multiply two numbers? We come up with algorithms to do that. So if you're interested in that, you can actually Google what's the fastest way to multiply two numbers, and you'll find the algorithm for it. But as a software engineer, it's more applied and hands-on. So you're learning different strategies to architect software and things like that. There is a lot of overlap between the two. And in terms of job prospects, a lot of the times both streams end up working the same jobs.
Okay.
But software engineering would be more practical and hands-on.
Okay. So you mentioned that you're a CS student at the University of Toronto. So just to clarify, is UFT Scarborough CS, is UFT St. George CS, and UFT Mississauga CS like the same thing at the end of the day, or are they different? And if so, like how different are they?
Right. So for the most part, they're similar in terms of course requirements. There might be slight differences, and in terms of the courses, there might be differences in what's taught in particular courses. And that's just because the departments are different, and the department chairs and the people making decisions have different opinions there. There is more overlap than there isn't, so you are learning essentially the same stuff, but they might be distributed differently amongst various courses. And that goes across all universities. Some universities might not teach a few things, but there is more overlap than not. It might just be taught in a different order.
Okay, so like in terms of like getting accepted to any of them, like do they all hold like the same requirements, or are they different for every campus?
No, so each university has different requirements, and even for the program of study I mentioned, the requirements are different. Traditionally, the St. George program of study used to be the most difficult to enter, but I know they've been making tweaks there where they're giving an easier chance to people who got into the department out of high school, as opposed to people who didn't actually get into computer science at the University of Toronto, and maybe they got into a different program or different department, and they're trying to apply after having in the University of Toronto. These numbers vary year to year, and especially during COVID, things are significantly different than what they normally are. But for this, you probably want to search online what the requirements are for each university.
Okay, awesome. Now, moving in terms of like the bigger picture of universities, how relevant is it from like how relevant is where you did your undergrad from for a CS particularly?
So it depends what you want to do after. I'm assuming, or I'm going to assume that most of you are like me and you're planning on working after doing your undergrad. Excuse me. If that's the case, if you're working in Canada, it doesn't matter all that much where you go. There's a few things, obviously, like you'd want to be working on extracurriculars outside of university, side projects, things like that, which is pretty common for most fields, I'd imagine. If you do want to leave Canada, it can help to go to a university which has more exposure. For example, if you study at the University of Waterloo, it might be easier to get co-ops in the United States just because they have more exposure there with those companies already.
Okay. So like we have like an audience that's scattered among different ages. We have people in high school, people in university right now. So what's one piece of advice that you'd give all of them, or like one piece of advice that you wish you like that you had known like beforehand?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I never did before going to university was actually look at the course offerings and the course requirements for my program and see what's actually being taught and offered. You can actually search this up, even if you're not applying to university right now, you can search up what type of courses there are. They give course descriptions. And especially for computer science, a lot of the professors, at least at the University of Toronto, post their content publicly on their own website. So you can see the type of stuff you'll be learning. That's something I never did before I went to university. I think that's really important. So because you get to understand what computer science actually is, especially because there are a lot of misconceptions on what you're going to be doing in your undergrad.
Awesome. And I'd leave this as the last question. What sort of employment opportunities are there for CS students?
Right. So the same things I sort of mentioned for the co-op. So you can work in data science, software developer. That's a pretty common choice for most people. You can work in IT if you want, UX, UI if you put a bit of effort into the human-computer interaction courses. So there is a variety of different things you can do. And as far as industries, you can work in big tech, you can work in biotech, you can work for a bank. There's a lot of jobs out there if you study computer science.
Thank you so much. I think we will now move forward with Brother Murtaza Sayed to present his presentation about business, and then afterwards we'll be asking him questions as well. And to end it off, we'll be having a group discussion with all the speakers. So Brother Murtaza Sayed, you can take the stage.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I want to thank Mahdi Youth for putting this event together. I think that this is something that's really important. Whenever I'm at, the local masjids and I see youth who I can try and help and advise, I try to do that. But I always think about how this could be done on a mass scale. And it seems like, Mahdi Youth Society has done a beautiful job of putting this event together. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So yeah, let's pull up the slides and we'll get right into it. So, as Usher might have told you, I'm a Rotman Commerce alumni. Rotman is the School of Business at the University of Toronto. I specialized in finance and economics there. And I'm currently pursuing my De Groot MBA, which is over at McMaster. And that's also in finance and then strategic business valuations. So next slide, please. I'll sort of skim over this as quick as I can because, it's already been mentioned. So yeah, I'm doing my MBA right now. It is a co-op program. And so I'm currently on a co-op over at Foresters Financial, which is a nonprofit life insurance company. And I'm working there as a financial analyst. My other work experience includes working in a tech consulting firm, also within finance, hedge fund investor relations, and retail banking. So I'm familiar with a few different industries and lines of business, and I think that's why, that's one of the reasons why I'm able to speak to business as an overall field. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is just a brief agenda of what we'll be going through, and I'll be speaking on what you guys need to know about these things. First and foremost, we'll discuss some university rankings, and I think this is a big deal, especially in high school. A lot of students tend to put a lot of focus on rankings, so I just want to discuss a little bit about this and talk a little bit more. Different program choices within business and what those choices mean for your future career. We're going to talk a little bit about internships and co-ops, costs. We're going to talk a lot about networking, and then just some tips and tricks for getting into your program, for university and beyond. So let's move on to the rankings. So there's a lot of different rankings available online. And sort of, I would say that most of the rankings fall into 3 different tiers. And this is something that I've sort of put together myself. And before I discuss this, I do want to say that these rankings have a lot of different nuances to them. And so I'm going to be going through that, and I want to explain what these rankings truly mean. There is no necessarily, one best school, university, or program. And so let's start making our way down the list, and then we can explain. So you have tier 1 schools, which have pretty good, recognition within Canada and internationally. These are based on things like the academic rigor, the networking, the opportunities they provide, and other things as well. And then you have the tier 2 schools, which, also consist of these things, but at a little bit of a lower level. And then you have the tier 3 schools. And like I said, there's no one area here, one school, which is perfect for every area. So for example, as you'll see, I've put, Brock University in tier 3, but they have a sports management program for sports business. And that is actually the best sports management program in, Canada, probably. And so as you can see, there's a lot of different things here. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. So for Queens, you have Queens Commerce, and then you have Western University with Ivy School of Business. I would say that these 2 schools are really good for finance and consulting specifically. When I say finance, I mean banking and different fields within capital markets. And then you have, the University of Toronto, the Rotman Commerce program. So historically, it's been excellent for finance. It's been pretty decent for consulting. But I would say that their #1 strength is definitely within their accounting. most of the people who specialize in accounting there get a decent GPA, and if they do networking, then they manage to land in the big four companies, which is KPMG, EY, Deloitte. So they manage to get into those companies, which is really good for accounting field, because that's what allows you to go and get your CPA after and become a professional accountant. You have the Schulich School of Business. Schulich is also pretty good. They have, they're tier 1. They have people in all different areas and a lot of alumni. I would say from my understanding, it's really good to go to Schulich if you're interested in marketing. And they have a couple of other programs and courses which are really useful as well. McGill and UBC are both internationally recognized schools along with U of T. And so if you're interested in going outside of Canada, not only to the US, but Europe or even Asia, I would say U of T, McGill, and UBC are sort of the best in terms of their international relations. Now, when we move on to tier 2, you're going to have a slight drop off in that international relationship, but that doesn't mean that they're not up to any sort of academic standard. You have the McMaster or Group Commerce program. You have Waterloo AFM, which stands for Accounting and Financial Management Program. So within Western, you have Ivy, which is their tier 1 program. And then you have a different business program called BMOS, which is, I believe, stands for Business Management of Systems or something like that. Then you have Laurier BBA. You have Guelph Commerce. And then there's also business programs at University of Ottawa and UTM. I would say that these business programs, their academic rigor is a little bit less. And the one big thing, the differentiation between tier 2 and tier 1 is the relationships with companies. So Queen's, Western, Rodman, Schulich, McGill, UBC, these are all known as target schools. And what that means is that for specific roles, jobs, and companies, these companies go to these schools to recruit from those schools specifically. So as an example, if we're talking about consulting, and we're talking about consulting at Bain, which is one of the top consulting firms, Bain specifically within Canada will look at these tier 1 schools for students that they want to recruit into their firm. Now, what that does not mean is that anybody who goes to a tier 2 school is immediately disqualified. It just means you might have to work a little bit harder to make those inroads at those companies and achieve what you want to achieve. So I know people from McMaster Commerce or Waterloo AFM who are in top-notch jobs like investment banking. And I also know people from tier 1 schools who are doing that. So again, if you go to a tier 2 or a tier 1, it's just a little bit different in the sense that you're not going to a target school and you're just going to have to work a little bit harder to get those opportunities. When it comes to tier 3 schools, which is like Brock, Carleton, UOIT, I would say that their academic standard is a little bit lower than tier 2 schools. And that's the major differentiation between 2 and 3. From my understanding, the acceptance averages for these schools tends to be in tier 1 schools, you have to have sort of a 90% or higher. If you're a couple percent below, usually you have to have a killer supplementary application. Tier 2 schools tends to be between 80 and 90, depending on which school you want to go to within that. Like I know McMaster, for most of the people that I've met and I know, most of them have an 85 plus to get into that program. But I know for Ottawa, I know people with low 80s who got into that program. Tier 3 tends to be a little bit lower than that, so 75 plus, and that varies. The one school that I forgot to mention here is Ryerson and their Ted Rogers business program. And so the thing about Ryerson is that in the past, it was sort of purely a tier 3 school. But recently, because of investment and because of more students going into that program and coming out and as alumni who help other Ryerson students, it's slowly transitioning now. So I would say that it's closer to a tier 2 school than a tier 3 school at this point. And so it's also a good option for people as well. But again, it depends on which field you want to work in. And so you really have to do the research on what you enjoy, what you want to work in. And then based on that, you want to pursue a program in one of these schools. So let's move on to the next slide. Right, so common programs and degrees, and you know, some of this is reiterated from the previous slide. So one of the most common programs in business is a Bachelor of Commerce or a BCom. That's what I did, for example. And that doesn't necessarily have much meaning to it alone. These are sort of just degree names and titles. What really matters is what you specialize in and what courses you take. So a BCom is one of the common ones, a Bachelor's of Business Administration, or BBA, is another one. And then the Bachelor of Accounting and Financial Management is also another degree. Now that one is actually only offered by Waterloo from my understanding. So that's the only place that you can go and get a BAFM. And that program at Waterloo is actually very unique in the sense that it's co-op. And what I mean by that is that it has, I think, 3 or 4 co-ops throughout your 5 years at the program, which is really good because by the time you graduate, you already have nearly a year of experience of real world work, which gives you a leg up over other candidates in other jobs. So moving on to different specialists, most business programs are divided into 3 different specialists. So you have accounting, which is somebody who wants to go and get their CPA and become a professional accountant. And then you can either work for a firm or you can start your own practice. And then you have finance, and then you have management. So within finance, you can work in things like banking. M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions, which is the buying and selling of companies. There's capital allocation, which is basically where do I put my money to optimize my business growth. And then there's risk management, which is self-explanatory. Within management, you have different fields like marketing, consulting, international business, organizational behavior, strategy, and then sports management. So management tends to be sort of that umbrella specialist where you can go and you can really partake in different courses and specialize through that. So that tends to be the overview and breakdown of most business programs. So let's move on to the next slide. Right, so co-ops and internships. So during the 4-month summer, from May to August in university, students can usually pursue internships at companies, and this helps them gain experience while they're in school. And again, just like Gazenbay said, you don't necessarily have to be in a co-op program to pursue these internships. This is during your summer when you're free and you can apply to these jobs and try and work over the summer. And the difference between co-op programs and this program, I would say, is the timing. So in most programs, you'll have this 4-month summer in which people will go apply and try and work, during this 4-month summer. In co-op programs, you're going to rotate. So one of your co-ops will be from, let's say, September to December. Then the next one will be from January to April. And then you'll have one more, which is probably from May to August. And the reason why this is crucial is because of competition. So while you're in school, in a normal program, and you're applying for these summer internships, so is every other school. Whereas co-op programs, since there's fewer programs of co-op, and most people don't necessarily go off cycle, what that means is that you're competing against less people for these roles. And so that actually is beneficial for you because it makes it easier to get the jobs. In terms of recruitment timelines, this is important to note and to know about once you're accepted into your program and you're trying to land an internship. So for the banks and finance roles, they tend to recruit earlier. So what I mean by earlier is from August to November for most of the roles. Now that doesn't mean that there's not going to be postings for May in April or even earlier than that. But majority of the roles tend to come around there, and definitely within capital markets, that's where the roles are posted. For accounting firms, it's definitely the earliest recruitment that I've seen. It used to be in September, October when I was in first year of my program. And as times went on, they shift back the recruitment like a couple of weeks every single year. And so now the recruitment period tends to be from July to September. And then consulting, I would say, is from August to September, but it depends on the firm. That's for the top 3 firms. And then other firms for consulting come a lot later, like in December. And so, how should this impact your decision for your university? I would say that, like I said before, you need to do your research into what you're interested in. And based on that, you want to attend a program in university that's recognized within that industry. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the costs of these business programs. So I haven't put specific costs because there's a lot of different nuances and breakdowns, and fees tend to vary from school to school. But I will say this, the tier 1 programs tend to be more expensive than the tier 2 and 3 programs. And so tier 1 tends to be, I would estimate a tuition cost of 40,000 to 70,000. So Queens, Ivy, and Rotman, from my understanding, they charge around 8,000 during the first year. And then every year after that, you're paying just a little under 20K. And so that's sort of how the math works. There's some exceptions to that. For example, Schulich, from my understanding and what I've heard, is still sort of a normal tuition. So you're paying like 8,000, 9,000 a year. The reason why is that some of these business programs are what is known as a deregulated program. And what that means is that the government doesn't fully control the amount that they can charge to students. And so that's why they're a little bit more pricey. Tier 2 and 3 programs, these tend to be a little bit cheaper. So places like McMaster, Western, but not at Ivy, Western at BMOS tends to be between 30,000 and 50,000. And so I would say that don't let cost discourage you alone. I would say that it's important to have a plan and different sources of funding. So I'm sure that, some people might have some RRSP, sorry, not RRSP, RESP, and they might have some savings from either themselves or their parents. And so that's one source of funding. Then you have OSAP, and when you take OSAP, there's a portion that's grants, which is money that you don't have to pay back, and then there's a portion that's loans, which is going to be paid back over time, and it's usually very low interest. So I would say that OSAP is definitely a good idea to take for most people because of the fact that it's such a low interest loan. Then there's university-specific grants. So for example, if you have taken OSAP and they didn't give you enough money, and you still need to cover your tuition or other costs, you can actually go to your university's financial aid office and you can talk to them and make an appointment and explain why you need money. And sometimes they would give you a grant, and this really helps a lot of different students. And then the last source of funding would be a part-time job throughout the year, and then the summer jobs. So, we spoke about co-ops and internships, and Gazenbai covered that, you might be paid between these bands. And so obviously you're being paid for a full-time job for 4 months, and that's actually really useful and can go directly towards your education. So, like I said, don't let cost discourage you. Focus on finding a plan to pay, the tuition and other fees without trouble, and then that way you can attend any program that you want to. So let's move forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so networking, and that little image there is my idea of trying to make this session a little bit more comedic. All right, so we're going to talk about networking. So networking, there's a lot of different facts and statistics on this, and you can look them up. But one that I thought was really powerful is that 85% of positions are filled through networking. And so whether that's through internal referrals or through external, when you're talking to somebody within a company and they refer you, then that's considered external. And so it's really powerful. What that means is that most people who receive jobs, they're talking to people within companies and they're trying to, get roles through those discussions. So a major method to differentiate yourself from the thousands of resumes that recruiters receive is networking. So, I love to hear this story about, for example, my name's Murtaza. So I have a pretty unique name when it comes to, Caucasian names or Canadian names in general. So if I'm at a networking event and I'm talking to somebody and I say, oh yeah, my name is Murtaza, blah, blah, blah. And then, we get into a discussion. Later that month when a job posting comes out and my resume comes across the table and they're filtering through the resume at 9 p.m. at night and their eyes are glazed because they want to go to sleep. And then they see, the name at the top says Murtaza. Oh, right. Yes, I remember him because he spoke to me at this event. And so because of that, I would say that that's one major way to differentiate yourself. And that would really help get those co-ops, internships, and full-time roles. It's important to have a networking strategy. So me personally, this is my strategy, and I would recommend this to anybody who asks. First and foremost, most of these business schools tend to have events on campus. They call professionals in from different companies. They hold events. You go in, you listen to them talk. And then afterwards, there's 30 minutes of mingling around the room and trying to talk to the professionals. The thing about these events is that you'll have maybe 5 representatives from the company. let's just use TD as an example. So you have 5 representatives from TD, but you have 200 students at the event. And so you can quickly see why that causes an issue, because you have 40 plus students trying to talk to one representative at a single time. And so the important thing at these events is to actually just get the contact info of these people. Usually it's in the presentation that they give. Get their names, get their contact info, figure out what they do, and then follow up. So go add them on LinkedIn and ask for a one-on-one meeting afterwards. And so that's sort of my networking strategy. I find that it works. I get to meet a lot of different people, and they're never usually hesitant to meet me one-on-one once they've already met me at the event. And so I would say that that's a great strategy to use, and definitely do that. Other tips, dress to impress. So what that means is, you want to dress in business formal when you go to these events. You want to make sure your clothes are well fitted, and you want to use more conservative colors. So, you don't want to show up in a hot pink tie, right? Because some companies might find that, this isn't appropriate, and due to that, you might be eliminated from contention for any jobs. So yeah, focus on listening attentively to what the presenters are saying. That's very important, because if they have said something in their presentation and later you go talk to them and you ask them a question which was already covered in the presentation, then they're going to feel as if you're not a good listener or you have a bad memory, and because of that, they're not going to want to hire you. The other thing is to never leave early. And the reason why I say this is I have a personal anecdote. So I was at an event for a bank, and I was at the event, and the event was packed. I'd say there's probably 300 people there. And even though they sent, I'd say 20 representatives, one of the representatives was for a specific field, which is really popular. And a lot of people were talking to that one representative. So throughout the whole 2 hours of mingling around, I was trying to talk to this representative, but I wasn't able to. So I quickly stepped out of the room near the end of the event. I stood outside for a second, and then I realized the event's over, they're packing up, but the representative is still there. So if I head back in quickly and just give her a little note onto why I want to, work at that company or for that role, then that might be helpful. So I quickly went back inside. I talked, and what happened is that I actually ended up getting a referral because of that, because I got that one-on-one conversation after showing up, basically after the event was over. And so never leave early. There's always an opportunity that might arise, and you don't want to miss that opportunity. So let's move forward. So tips and tricks. I'm going to be offering tips on 2 different things. One is on sort of your application process currently, because I understand that there might be people here who are in high school right now, and they want to know, what are these universities looking for? What should they write? And how is that going to affect their chances of getting in? So, first and foremost, your grades need to be good. You want to have the choice of any program that you want to attend. And to do that, just get the highest grades possible. So really focus on grades. That's primary. Now, secondary is your supplementary application. And for supplementary application, usually they ask a couple of questions, or they'll ask you to write a personal essay. And these are sort of my tips on what you need to do to have a successful supplementary application. First and foremost, get multiple people to edit your sub apps. Perfection is a must. If they see typos or errors or grammatical mistakes, then that's a really easy thing to just redline you from the list for the program. 2 other things that you need to do is focus on leadership and extracurriculars beyond your individual learning. So for example, if you're in school and you're on a team which helps to orient the grade 9s into the school, then I would really speak about how that's your sort of leadership skill has allowed you to do that, and you built that skill through that event. So that's one thing that schools really look at, is leadership. They don't want people who just sit at the back of the class and do their tests and go home, right? They want people who will actually lead at the school, and not only at the school, but later in life, because that produces a great reputation for the school. And so the third tip that I have is to tell your story, not anyone else's. So many times I've seen a lot of high school students sort of glance over at their buddy's application and think, okay, yeah, I'm going to just use the same application as him, or talk about the same things and change a couple of sentences. that's not really appealing. And the reason why is because when you tell your story specifically about why you want to do something or be in a program, first of all, it's a lot more convincing. And second of all, it's it's unique. It's you. So that's going to help you get accepted into the program. And lastly, you need to acknowledge why that specific program will help you accomplish your goals when it comes comparing it to other programs. So let's say that you want to be an accountant. So you need to acknowledge and talk about why the program at, let's say, Rotman specifically is going to help you become an accountant. You can say, I've spoken to Rotman alumni, and they say that the program's academic knowledge that they provide for accounting is really a good, strong fundamental base. And beyond that, they have a really high rate of passing the CPA exam, and also they have a great acceptance into the Big Four accounting firms. And so that would be, first of all, that shows that you did your research on the program. Second of all, it shows that you logically reasoned out why this works. And third, it sets up in the recruiter's mind that, okay, this student here, he knows what he's talking about, and he has a very clear pathway in the future. And so it would sort of have them leaning towards accepting you versus other candidates. Now, once you're accepted to the program, then these are sort of 3 tips that I would offer right now, which would help you, in the future. So first and foremost, you need to review your lectures daily. So let's say you have 3 classes during the day from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Once you get home, take a short break and then go over all those lectures, because that will really help you to solidify the knowledge that you learned. It's going to help you keep up with your work. And honestly, in university, procrastination is one of the worst things you can do. In high school, I'm sure you'll find a lot of 90+ average students who tell you, oh yeah, that test I studied the night before, just 2 hours for it. But in university, you can't do that. You have to keep up with your work, and you have to have a solid knowledge from day one, not just the night before the test, because the tests are so much more complex, and they test your thinking rather than just simple knowledge. And so it's very important to keep up with your work. If you fall behind, then it's very hard to catch up and get good marks. Number 2, organization is key. So especially right now in the COVID environment, school has gone online. I myself did a semester online, and I found that one of the biggest things is that keeping track of your assignments and when they're due and all the different little things that you have to do for school is very important. So I would highly recommend that if you don't already have a system of organization, you do that. You learn how to do that now. And in university, usually the way it works is that you'll get a syllabus at the beginning of the year, and that syllabus will have the different assignments and tests that you're going to have throughout that course. And what you should do is you should open up, a calendar, whether that's a Google Calendar or whether it's an actual paper calendar, and go and mark the specific dates of those assignments and tests for every single course. And now you'll never miss a single, deliverable throughout your university career. So organization is really important, and I stress that you develop those skills early on. And the third thing is self-learning in your fields is crucial. And what I mean by this is that in university, they try and teach you theory and knowledge, but they don't necessarily teach you practical application. So for example, I'll talk about myself. As I said, I studied finance. So within finance, they teach you sort of investment theory, how to invest money, how to make money through investments. But they don't teach you how to actually model out an investment, how to tell if it's a good investment, and sort of compare it to industry and see if that investment is better than others. And that's one thing that you can learn through self-learning. So, you want to go online on Google, search up your fields of interest, read more about it, talk to industry professionals. I would say that that's a very good way for you to do some self-learning. So let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so I think, that actually brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone for your time, and I really appreciate it. And thank you, Mahdi Youth, for having me on. I am fairly connected, and I'm open to any questions. If any of the participants have any further questions about the business programs, about careers, I'm happy to talk. So my LinkedIn name is right there. feel free to connect with me, or you can shoot me an email at that email address. So thank you so much, and I'll pass it back to the MC.
All right, thank you so much, Brother Murtaza. That was a very enlightening presentation, and I think we all benefited from that at large. Just to ask some questions on behalf of everyone, I just wanted to ask or clarify. You mentioned a Bachelor of Commerce and Bachelor of Business and Bachelor of Accounting and Financial Management, right? And how like they're all like different in their own ways. Can you just like elaborate on like what are their similarities in terms of like course load and like in terms of scheduling and so on?
Right. So yeah. So those are basically the three main degrees that I would say most people tend to shoot for when they're trying to work in business. The difference, there's no difference between the three, but there's a difference when it comes to the internal, specialist within each of those. So you can do a BBA in marketing, and you can also do a BCom in marketing. And so they're not necessarily different in that sense. What's the difference comes when you choose your specialist. So, obviously a BBA in marketing is different than a BCom in finance, right? Mm-hmm. And so really focus on learning what these different fields mean. And through that, you can determine which one you want to pursue.
Okay. So in terms of a specialist that you talked about, right? So for example, like if I want to do like a specialist in like, or like be a specialist in accounting, let's say, right? Does that limit me in terms of choosing what bachelor degree I choose, or do all of them offer the same specialist that you can choose from?
Yeah, I would say all of them offer the same specialist at most of the schools.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for clarifying. So basically your journey incorporates you completing an undergrad as well as a master's. So can you just like briefly explain why you chose to pursue a master's degree?
Yeah, definitely. So me personally, I felt that from the Rotman Commerce program, that really solidified the fundamental knowledge that I needed for business success. But then after the program, after I entered the workplace and I worked for a little bit, what I felt was that the thing that the undergrad program lacked was to teach you a little bit more about business professionalism and like those networking tips that I just gave right now. I felt that the program didn't really focus on that. It focused more on academia. And I thought that an MBA is a great way to learn that. And also, like I mentioned, I'm pursuing a co-op MBA. And for me personally, that was a big thing because I felt that the 3 co-ops will allow me to try out different industries and see what I really enjoy working. So that's sort of the reasoning that I had for pursuing a master's. And I would say that, if I look back on this in 5 to 10 years, I'd say that a master's degree tends to also open up more doors for you.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Now I'd like us to move forward towards a group discussion where we'll be having all the speakers actually talking together and just like having like a engaging discussion. So I'd like to ask like the first question to each and any one of you, and if any of you would like to answer first, please feel free to do so. I just want to ask you, so what's a typical day in your what's your typical day as a student? Like focusing more towards like your undergrad journey, like from the first few years, like how did it incorporate, and how is it different with online school? So if anyone would like to go first.
Sure, I guess I can take that. So before the pandemic, usually have classes Monday through Friday. Every now and then you might have one day off. One sec, sorry. So you might have like one day off in the week in computer science, or I don't know how other programs are, but usually I'd have, for example, maybe Thursday I had no classes, but I'd be working on schoolwork every day. So some courses, particularly math courses, you get a lot of homework. For your programming courses, there's less difficult work, but if you're not the strongest in programming, you might be spending more time in that too. But usually students tend to spend less time in those courses. With the pandemic, as everything's online, a lot of classes are asynchronous, so you're really flexible on when you can learn, but the challenge there is you have to be responsible to actually watch your lectures and actually do your work. And even pre-pandemic, you're still responsible for going to class. You're still responsible for doing your work. No one's going to come and tell you, hey, you're failing this course. You sort of have to take responsibility, maybe have like a schedule and agenda and plan your stuff out so you make sure you're getting stuff done.
All right, thank you. And if Brother Murtaza, if you can also just like highlight a few things.
Yeah, definitely. As Kazim mentioned, I would say that, in a business program, you tend to have a lot more free time when it comes to classes. In a science program, you might take a course, and that course will have a tutorial, and then it will also have a lab. So per week, you might have 8 hours dedicated for one course. Whereas in a business program, you might only have just the lecture, and so you have maybe 4 hours or 3 hours dedicated to that one class. And so because of that, your timetable tends to be a little bit more sparse. And so, like he mentioned, I would recommend that you try and fill, 3 days, with classes, and that way you get the rest of the week to study it and you have it off. And so that's sort of what I had when I was in school. I think in first year I had 1 day off, and for the remaining years I had 2 days every week off. And that was good because, for example, I was able to work part-time jobs or study more and things like that. So that's sort of pre-pandemic what the daily life looked like. You sort of have classes, you get home, you study. And I would say that you want to put in my general rule of thumb is that whatever class time you have, you want to put about half that time towards studying. So in a day, if you had, let's say, 5 hours of class, you want to do 2.5 hours behind the scenes after class to recap those classes and do the homework questions. So that was pre-pandemic, and then like you mentioned, for now with Corona and online school, you need to be very disciplined. You need to really make sure you're keeping up with the content, watching the lectures and doing all the homework before the deadlines.
For sure, thank you. We briefly discussed the transition from high school to university, and we like you both provided tips in terms of doing enough research, making sure your marks are good for your program, and just making sure you have a good work ethic. So just from your own personal experiences, what are ways that you stay organized that you were able to learn from your first year in university or from in fact even high school? And how have your high school studying techniques helped you in terms of your university studies? So if Brother Kazim could address that first.
Yeah, so something I do every semester is your professors will usually give you a syllabus for deadlines and whatnot. You'll have your courses. I like to fill out everything in Google Calendar. I'll get reminders like half an hour before or like a day before something's due, an exam is due. Just having a plan set out before the semester begins is very important. And something I used to do, not so much anymore, but especially for the first years, like before the semester started, I would sort of talk to senior students, try to get some course content beforehand and start prepping earlier so I would have a better sense of how difficult my semester is going to be. And if the semester is too challenging, you don't have to take 5 courses. You can take 4 if you need to, because it can be better to take that one less course and be successful as opposed to taking 5 and then not being able to manage it. Yeah.
For sure, thank you. And Brother Murtaza, if you can also give us some tips that you had from your own experience.
Yeah, I agree with those sentiments. And then 2 other things that I would add is one, I would say the way that you study in university is completely different than high school. In high school, you do, the assigned homework questions. You might do a little bit extra reading of the textbook or whatever materials, and you go and you ace the test. In university, that's not the case. Not only do you do the assigned questions, but then you have to do unassigned questions. You have to find your own materials for learning. And then it's very important to do past tests. And so I would say that's, different. You need to find how you study, how you learn, and that's very important. And then number 2, I would say peer learning is very helpful. So me personally, I would create a Facebook group for a class, right? And then people from the university, from the course would join that group. And now, let's say, I'm studying and no one's available to help me with a problem that I can't solve. I take a photo, I put it in the Facebook group, and out of the 300 members, somebody replies right away.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really cool. And we talked about how staying on top is very important, right? And how in university, you both talked about how procrastination is a killer. So if you can both highlight any sort of resources that you use in terms of staying on top of your courses, like for example, be it like a Google Calendar, right, or anything like that. So if Brother Kazim, if you can just like tell us about anything that you use.
Yeah, Google Calendar is sort of my go-to just to plan out what I'm doing. Even when I've done work studies at the university in the past, which is sort of part-time jobs, but you're doing it with the department in the school, and I've also included like time slots for that in my calendar. Google Calendar is nice because you have it on your phone, and if you're on campus or if you're at home, you get a note. You can set when you get the notification, so there's no surprises. So if there's an exam coming up, maybe you want to get notified a week before. So I think that's super helpful. Other than that, with I said, like having a group of friends or a group of peers in the class to keep everyone in check, sort of help each other out. That's also very useful.
Cool, thank you. And Brother Murtaza.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Google Calendar, that's my go-to. You can quickly just make notifications or reminders or events on there, and that's very good. And I would say in the business program, it's very important to use a tool like that because not only are you doing, your coursework or tests or assignments, but then you also have the networking events. So, I know of people who would schedule a one-on-one meeting with a professional in the industry, and they forget about it and they don't show up to the meeting. Well, there goes your chance to, land that job, right? So I would say it's very important to sort of schedule your events on there. And when it comes to procrastination, I don't know. I mean, the thing that helps me is just to think about what I'm going to have to do in 3 days from now if I don't start working today. And so that really helps me get motivated to start working even when I don't necessarily have to.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I just want to let the audience know that if they also have any questions that they'd like to be seen answered, they can add it into the live chat. So there's a live chat feature and you can add your question and we can take those questions from there. Brother Murtaza, I just wanted to ask you something particular to business. So let's say you have, would a higher ratio of my work ethic amid coronavirus like involve 2 hours of practice, or is it more like dependent about like how many courses I have and how much time each course gives in terms of like synchronous lectures and so on?
I mean, it definitely varies, right? So you're going to have weeks where you have a very limited amount of work and you might only need to put in, 1 to 2 hours a day. And then you're going to have weeks like midterm weeks or finals weeks where you have 3 or 4 exams coming up, and you're going to have to put in maybe 6 to 10 hours a day, just grinding away studying. And so I would say that doesn't change, with Corona or online school. That's consistent. You're going to have some weeks where you've covered all the lectures and you don't really have much to do. And then you're going to have other weeks where you're behind on your lectures, you have assignments due, and you have exams. So it really varies, and I would say that that ratio where I said that rule of thumb, you want to do about half that time from your classes. That might change due to the fact that you're asynchronous, and let's say you have a lecture recording, so it's very easy to just refer back to a lecture. That way you don't have to review it as much. But yeah, so it depends. But I would say that that's sort of the general rule of thumb.
Okay, cool. Now I want to sort of shift the discussion more towards co-op opportunities and even before that, let's actually focus more towards funding for post-secondary, because I know that's a big concern that a lot of people have in terms of getting finances to pursue their post-secondary dreams. So what are some resources that are available to people in Toronto or Ontario or even in Canada, in fact, that you also have used and you would like to share with our audience? So Brother Kazim, if you can start off.
Yeah, so PostApp is a big one. I'm sure if you're in high school right now, your guidance counselors or whatnot will cover that in detail with you guys as well, but that's a huge resource which most students end up taking. Another thing, Brother Murtaza mentioned deregulated programs at the University of Toronto. Sometimes you can get grants to help offset the cost. I know at UTSC for computer science, they call it UTAPs. So you can get a couple of $1,000s there to help offset costs. Again, you can go to your financial aid's office and discuss your situation. Other than that, working part-time, there's a lot of part-time opportunities on campus as well, which you can partake, especially as a computer science student, because every department wants a developer in some sort of project. Other than that, yeah, just part-time jobs and co-ops are helpful.
Brother Kazim, you talked about something called grants. So if you can tell us like what a grant is and how it's
Right.
different from a loan.
Yeah, so grants you don't pay back. It's basically free money if you want to think of it that way. You get that. So OSAP is split into two, loans and grants. Some of it you pay back, some of it you don't. But the UTAPs, which UFT gets for students who need more funding support, that's also a grant. You don't have to pay that back. And I guess one last thing: if you do really well in high school, you usually get a scholarship when you come in, and if you continue to do well, you can maintain that. So that helps as well.
Awesome. And if Brother Murtaza, if Brother Kazim missed anything, feel free to add in.
One other thing that I would recommend is to look at scholarships, outside of your specific university. So there's a lot of different organizations out there which will put out a scholarship. For example, I think there's it's a nonprofit organization or something, and they put out this scholarship called the scholarship for Schulich Women in Engineering or something like that. And it's actually an $80,000 scholarship. So literally you can cover all of your university costs. And I actually know someone personally who got that scholarship. So I would say, and that's a big one and it's a popular one that's competitive, but there's, I would say, thousands of scholarships out there from different organizations which you might be eligible for. So go on Google, type in, Canadian scholarships and look through a list and see what you're eligible for. That's very important. And even within our community, actually, I'm aware of, I think JCC offers a scholarship, and you can apply for that. And so, I would say that that's a big source of funding, which a lot of students miss.
Awesome. And I think a concern that students have is that for scholarships, they're worried that they don't have the right marks. So are scholarships based solely on marks, or are they also dependent upon like extra work that you do outside of school?
It's definitely a holistic review. So they look at things beyond just marks. But even if let's say you don't necessarily think you have the best marks, you have to remember you're being compared against a pool of candidates, right? So, I remember there was, a very niche or unique scholarship. I forget what it was. It was like Polish woman in STEM or something like that. And I recall, reading the story that the scholarship actually ended up going to a male candidate because of the fact that no woman applied.
Wow.
And so, that's obviously something that happens, and it's because people probably think that they don't have the marks for it or they don't have, whatever for it. But imagine if a single woman applied to that scholarship, she would have gotten it right away because she was the only one who was actually eligible, right? So
For sure.
Always apply. Never eliminate yourself from contention for any job, school, or scholarship. Just always apply.
Awesome. Thank you. And now I think we can move the discussion forward towards internships and co-op opportunities. So I was wondering if any of you could just share like a personal experience, because I think we could really benefit from how your experiences what went with the finding a job, with the resume building process, with networking, and so on. So if Brother Kazim, if you can start off with that, please.
Yeah, so specifically for computer science, I mentioned how there's a bunch of different streams you can go into for your internships and co-ops. Sometimes people might tell you you can't start off as a software developer right away. You have to do maybe a QA internship first. That's not true. What you do need to do is you need to have a lot of side projects. You need to be learning industry standards on the side because, like Brother Murtaza mentioned, university is very theoretical. And there's not always a full crossover from school to work. There is some, but you have to fill in the gaps yourself. Other than that, I would say apply to jobs that you think you might be interested in. And it's really also a time to see what you might enjoy doing or what you might be good at as well. So don't completely do something just because it's popular. Also look at things which you might also be interested in. And I guess for networking can be pretty uncomfortable for the first few times. At least it was for me. Something that's helped me is I don't always go in with the mindset of I need to convince this person to get me a job. It's more so I want to start off just by building a relationship, get to know what their role is, what this company does, and what type of opportunities they have for me, and how I may or may not be able to fit in with them. So I guess not jumping right away to saying, hey, I want this job, and sort of building a relationship first.
Awesome.
And that's what I thought. Yeah.
And Brother Murtaza, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, and so I love the fact that Brother Kazim touched on the fact that you want to talk to people, not necessarily just so they can give you a job. And so what I mean by that is, for example, within finance, which is my field, a lot of people come into university in first year and they say, I really want to do investment banking. And then you ask them, okay, what's investment banking? And they say, I I don't know. I have no clue. And so one of the ways to learn that is to actually go talk to an investment banker, right? So when you're networking, you can ask them questions. So what do you actually do? What does your day-to-day look like? And that's actually really useful when it comes to getting those jobs, because now when you write your cover letter, you show knowledge that you know about the role, about the company. And then when you go for the interview, you're not just talking, saying general things. You can talk about very specific things. You can say, I'm interested in investment banking. I've learned about M&A transactions. I saw in the news, 2 weeks ago, this company bought this company. I thought that was very cool. And the investment banking team, did this work on it. And so, that's how you really land a role, right? You do the research, you see if you're truly interested in it. And if you are, then now you can sort of convey that passion. And that leads into my second point. Do things that you're actually interested in. I know a lot of kids and students and professionals now who absolutely hate their job. And the only reason they do it is because they want a payday or because of prestige or status. And so I would highly recommend you avoid that, because of the fact that if you work in something you're actually interested in, you will naturally progress and you will naturally end up doing very good in that field. I know people who are, they're just built for accounting. They are amazing accountants, and they love their job. And when they work at these companies, people recognize that and they see that, oh wow, this person doesn't shy away from any task. They want to step up to the plate and take that challenge on. And so I would say that those are my two tips on what will happen. Sort of your passion will be conveyed genuinely to these people who are selecting candidates. And due to that, you're going to have a higher rate of success when it comes to interviews and jobs.
Cool, thank you. We got a question from the chat. So the question is, amid the pandemic, is there a virtual co-op opportunity for high school and university students?
Yeah. So most co-op opportunities, especially in computer science that were in person, have shifted to online. It's been a pretty easy transition for a lot of people, including myself, for online opportunities, just because most of the work you do is autonomous anyways. So maybe you hop on a Zoom in the morning, you do your daily, I'm doing this, today I did this, yesterday what my blockers are, you get started. So I don't think there's a big difference. For people in university right now who want to intern outside of Canada, it is a bit difficult because there are travel suspensions and also some visa bans at the moment. But in Canada, I don't see any difference. At least all my friends who have been applying for co-ops this winter, all of them were able to secure good positions for the same type of companies which we were offering previously as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, for business, I'd say pretty much the same. Co-ops, across the board are available. There was a bit of a slowdown, but that was not necessarily due to the fact it's online, but due to the economy. I would say that for some firms, like I know Deloitte had a hiring freeze, and so they weren't able to hire co-ops this past summer. But I would say that overall, companies have managed to transition online, and it's business as usual.
Awesome, thank you. What can we expect from recruitment and applying to jobs? Like in terms of the process, like let's say we don't land a job, like how should we move about after that? Like if you have any personal experiences, it'd be really nice if you can actually share them, because I think we could really benefit. So if any of you would like to start it off.
Sure. So if you don't land a job, that's okay, because you can always keep applying. Like with anything, if you're not successful, you want to do a retrospective, right? You see why you didn't get a job. Maybe what you could have done was like earlier on in your job search. If you're in a co-op program, you have resources there for you who help you and mentor you to secure positions. So you can get help. Even if you're not in a co-op program, you can talk to senior students and get resume feedback, improve your resume. see what type of extracurriculars you need to start working on in order to make yourself a more competitive prospect. But yeah, I guess like with any other thing you're not successful with, you want to look at what went well, what went wrong, and how you can improve.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go about it. Definitely, reflect and see why you thought you didn't get a role, and try and focus on how you can improve that. Yeah, and same thing in business. If you don't get a job, a lot of people don't land first year internships because honestly, you're a first year, you haven't learned much, and you might not be that valuable to a company. And so I would recommend that you pick up a job elsewhere, because honestly, any job helps with resume building if you know how to take those skills and transfer them to a different role, right? So that's one recommendation. Another one is to look at what's known as, I think it's called work-study programs. These are jobs which are basically sponsored through government, university relationships, and basically you can work on your campus, and sometimes they have positions open during summer or whatever slot you may have an internship in. So those are two recommendations, and the third one is to I would say never stop looking. So I know people that they did not get a job, they got rejected, a bunch of interviews but no offer, all the way up until April, and in the last week of April they saw a job posting that starts in 3 weeks because I guess maybe somebody dropped out of their internship. They applied to it, they got the interview, they got the job. So never stop looking. At any point in time, there might be a posting that you're interested in.
Awesome. And how much has this COVID situation changed the amount of jobs available? Like, are they still, is it still likely for a second year or third year to land a job, or is it more difficult now?
All right. I wouldn't say it's significantly more difficult. I have noticed that from my friends who've applied, they've secured a bit later. But I don't know anyone who hasn't been able to secure it so far in this term anyways. And Murtaza said, keep applying until the end. Like sometimes you get positions. I have a friend who got his co-op position like halfway into September. So he was studying while still applying, and he managed to actually switch out into that co-op program like very late on. So it really is never too late. Other than that, if you want to, again, if a lot of computer science students like to apply outside of Canada, right now a few companies are accepting applications, but again, it's contingent on the visa ban that the Trump administration has.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say again, it varies company to company. Overall, I would say it hasn't affected the situation too much. When it comes to banks, banks stated it from day one that it's going to be business as usual, except it's going to be online now. And so they didn't change any of their budgets or plans. It was the exact same. They're going to hire the same amount of people, post the same amount of jobs. In general, though, yes, I have seen a bit of a drop in the amount of roles. But I would say that it's not that significant, and it's more so to do with economic reasons rather than being online and COVID.
Awesome. And I think that this would be our last question. So, how likely am I to get a job in either field, and then what income should I be expecting for by starting off and within let's say 5 years? So, Brother Kazim, if you can start it off.
Wait, sorry, was that for qual positions or after you graduate?
After you graduate.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in computer science, it depends what industry you end up going in. If we take tech as an example, generally, if you've interned in a few places and you land a position in relatively established, or even it could be a startup company for tech as a software engineer or developer, or even in UX or UI, you're looking to make close to 6 digits starting in Canadian dollars.
Okay.
But it depends on the industry. Other industries, you could be getting paid significantly less or significantly more. If you work at a hedge fund, for example, you could be getting paid a lot more.
Okay. So was that first year after graduation, or is that within 5 to 6 years after graduation?
I was assuming there you've done a few internships and established yourself. If it's you're right out of uni, it's around. Again, it depends industry to industry, but typically you're making north of 75K if you're in tech. If you're not in tech, you're making less, unless you're at a hedge fund.
Okay. Okay, and Brother Murtaza, if you can also add on.
Yeah, I was just laughing. He said, unless you're at a hedge fund. So, obviously that's a top-notch company to be at, and no matter where you're working, whether it's operations, tech, or finance side in the hedge fund, you're going to be making a lot of money. But yeah, so I would say in the business field, it depends on which company you're. One is it depends on the field you're in general, and then two, the company you're at. And so what I mean by that is this. So most entry-level average positions for management and accounting and finance tend to pay between 45,000 to 60,000 per annum, and that tends to be the average and entry-level role. But then you have consulting, and consulting tends to pay between 60 to 80,000. And at the top end of consulting, where if you're at Boston Consulting Group, if you're at Bain, or if you're at McKinsey Consulting, you're going to be making 80 to 100,000 salary plus a huge bonus. And so, very large differentiation even just within consulting alone. Then you have finance. So within finance, like I said, you can expect that 45 to 60 if you're in a standard entry level role. But if you manage to land something in banking and capital markets, your salary will be heavily inflated, usually around 80,000 for entry level. And then in most banking positions, you tend to get a 40 to 50% bonus on that. And so I would say that it really varies on what field you're in and which company you end up going to. You can be in banking, and you can be in banking at TD and be making 80,000, or you can be at banking at a boutique firm, at a smaller firm, and that might only pay 70. And so very large band. But the thing that I would really preach especially to the people who are joining in right now, their youth, is not to focus on salary when it comes to early on in your career. Really focus on what is this job doing for helping me build my skill set, and will that allow me to progress and be in a role 10 years from now, which is going to pay me 5 times as much, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know people that try and take a shortcut. They go into a job which has high pay, but they don't necessarily like the job, or it's not in their field. And they actually end up hating the job. They work there for about a year, they leave, and then they have no future career path. So I would focus on sort of looking at things beyond just the salary. But of course, salary is important. Don't get me wrong. Don't go take a job for $30,000 out of university. That's not why you went to school. So definitely, know your worth, know your value, but focus on, building that skill set and progressing in your career.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if I could just ask each one of you to just share some final words for the audience. So Brother Kazim, if you can start off, please.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so I guess I know, especially right now, it can be really stressful applying to university. I know I was really, really stressed in grade 12 when I was going to university. As long as you work hard, whether or not you get into your university of choice, things can still work out, right? As long as you keep working hard, you'll find a way to make things work, find a way to do something you enjoy. And I guess, yeah, good luck, and don't stress too much. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And Brother Murtaza.
Yeah, and I would say, I repeat that sentiment, and my closing advice is this, and sort of for me personally, this is where my religious aspect comes in, right? So I have thought that, I applied to this job, I had an amazing application, I had an amazing interview, the guy really liked me when he interviewed me, and I didn't get the role. So 5 months down the line, in hindsight, I look back and I think, oh man, if I had gotten that role, that actually would have gone really bad. And so you really need to understand that, Allah has a plan for you, and you need to believe in that plan, trust in that plan. So, apply to the schools, do your best, never give up, and then take all the steps on your end that you can to ensure you have the best chance at everything. But if things don't go your way, it is for a better reason. Just understand that.
Cool. Thank you so much. And I think that wraps up our discussion for tonight. I'd like to thank the both of you for taking out your time and sharing your advice. It really meant a lot, and I'm sure we all benefited as a community at large. For the audience, just to let you know that we are going to continue having 2 more seminars, one happening tomorrow night about engineering and law, and next Saturday about medicine and health and life science. So before we end the program, I'd like to remind the audience that The Mahdi Youth is continuing to have weekly and monthly programs. For example, we're having the Shab Chuma programs. We have a Chuma speech every week. So please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as follow our social media networks, so that you are caught up with everything. One more reminder is that if any of you are interested in contacting these professionals outside of this environment, you can contact us on our social media pages, and we will share their social media contacts with you, so you can contact them yourself. With that being said, I'd like to thank the speakers again for taking out your time.